In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a mask that will allow you to mask the person and the hair quite well using channels. It's a few steps to do this. It's nothing particularly difficult, but hopefully you'll be able to follow along. So the first thing you need to do is next to your layers you should find your channels. If you click through your red channel, your green channel and your blue channel, you'll see that one channel contains more contrast between the hair and the background. We're not just looking for a high contrast image, we are looking for contrast between the hair and the background, because the green channel probably has more contrast in general, but the blue channel gives us more contrast from the hair to the background. Usually it's going to be the green or the blue, not the red channel. Once you know which channel it is, you're going to duplicate that channel. Now we can't use the quick key for this, which is Command J for layers. It doesn't work in channels. To make a duplicate of the channel, you can use the channel menu, which is just off screen, and choose duplicate, or you can drag the channel onto the new channel icon and it will create this blue copy. So it's a copy of the blue channel, and I'm just going to call this mask. When we save selections, they also save into our channels as masks. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to increase the contrast between the hair and the background. So we're just going to use a simple curves adjustment. So image adjustments, curves. And I'm just going to move the dialog box over a little bit so you can see what I'm clicking on. Now these eyedroppers here, one is my black point, that's the one filled with black, and the one filled with white is my white point. I want to set my black point for the hair. I don't want to set it to necessarily the lightest part of the hair, but I definitely want to darken the hair overall. You'll see that what it does is where my black is normally here at 0, at around this is a 75% mark here, so I'm guessing at around 82% grey is saying anything that is 82% grey or above is going to be black. Now that's what black point does. It means that you can bring your shadows in, and I know I'm clipping the image, and that's okay because I want to do that with this one. I now want to set my white point. My white point is the eyedropper set with white, and I'm going to click it on the background. I don't necessarily want it on the darkest part of the background. I want to choose somewhere where I can still see these strands of hair. So I'm just going to undo that, Command Z to undo. I'm going to come down here a little bit to where it's a little bit lighter. And here I can see that. I can still see the strands of hair. And now I can go ahead and click OK. The next step is I need a good selection of the face. Now you can use any selection tools you feel comfortable with. I'm actually going to use the pen tool. If you've never used the pen tool, this is probably not the time to start using it. It can be a little bit tricky to master it. If you've used Illustrator before, then you'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable with the pen tool. What it allows you to do is to draw curves. So curves as in vectors. And I need a very clean selection over the lighter areas. Over the darker area like the t-shirt, I'm not too worried about. So I need a clean selection over the arm. I'm going to click up here to set the point on the arm. So like I said, you can do this with any selection tool that you feel comfortable with. I just prefer to do my mask selections with the pen tool for a lot of them. So I'm just adding in those curves. My selections may be a little bit off because I'm doing this for the video recording, and I don't want to take too much of your time getting the absolute perfect selection. So once I've clicked around here, because I don't need a perfect selection on the hairline, here I now have a path. You guys, if you're not using the pen tool, if you're using one of the selection tools, will automatically have a selection. when you're working with paths, you have to turn your path into a selection. You can command click on the path thumbnail, or you can click on the make path a selection tool down on the bottom of the palette. But I'm going to command click on here, and here my path automatically becomes a selection. Now I want to change my foreground and background colors to black and white, so D will change it. I need black on the background. X switches them. Now I can just delete this. I hit the delete key, and here I have solid black. If you're using one of the selection tools like the lasso tool, you'll probably want to put a 1 pixel feather on your selection, but with the pen tool you generally don't need to feather it. So my mask is actually looking pretty good right now. I am going to need to zoom up on it. And now I want to paint with my paintbrush, so I'm going to get a smaller paintbrush. And I want to change the blending mode of my paintbrush to overlay. And this will allow me to paint black on the areas of the mask that I need to be black. So I'm going to change my foreground and background color, so I'm now painting with black. And sorry, it's coming up with an error. I'm just going to pause this for a second. Okay, so now I have my paintbrush. The opacity I have set to 50%. For this I would work at both 50% and sometimes 100%. What it allows me to do is I can paint black into the areas that are black, and you can see that I'm not being very careful about how I'm painting, but it won't paint over the white edges when I use this. So I'm just going to touch up some of these. I need to go over it a few times anywhere where it's solid white, or at least very light. So if I want to, I can take this off overlay to do the hairline. So what overlay allows you to do is paint over the edges. If I don't have it on overlay mode, I'm just going to put it back to 100% opacity, then I must be very careful about not going too close to the edge. If I go too close to the edge, you can see what happens. So once I put it in overlay mode, I'll be able to go closer to the edge without having to worry about the brush bleeding through. So I usually do the first touch up of the hair while I'm painting on normal mode and full opacity, and then I'll come back in and do my last cleanup with it on overlay mode. So what you're trying to do here is make the whole of her completely solid black. And again, I've got some areas in here. I'm going to go back to overlay mode now, and back to my 50% opacity, and just do a little bit of cleanup. And now I can just touch up a little bit closer to the edges of the hair, because I don't have to worry too much about if I go over the edge. Now you don't want to go over the edge too far, or that will be a problem. So once I've got it to this point, I now need to go in on the white areas. So you'll see that there's a little bit of messiness on the background here, so I'm going to switch my color. I'm going to stay with the 50% opacity, and I'm going to paint white in here. I'll need to do several passes on it to get all of that color out. And around the hairline, I'm just going to soften it a little bit. This is why I have the lower opacity. I don't want to take all of the stray hairs out, but I'm just clicking on here with that lower opacity so that I'm setting a degree of transparency on here. And that transparency will allow me to blend the hair in more evenly. So if you're taking a model out of the background like I'm doing here, one of the most important things is that they're going to need to be photographed against a fairly neutral background. This works great for studio images, not so great for anything with a detailed background. For the hair on here, I can go back in and just darken it up. and just a little bit on here as well. So anywhere where I have shades of grey on here are going to be partially transparent. So once I have this, this is what my mask looks like. And you can see the strands of hair are all showing up quite well on here. So the next thing that I want to do is turn the mask into a selection. I can either click on this icon, which will create a selection, or I can command click on the layer mask icon. So like paths, layers, or channels, anytime you command click on the mask, on the icon for paths, channels, or layers, it will load that as a selection. Alternatively, you can just use the selection button down here. So now I have this as a selection. You can see that what it's actually selected here is the background. If I want her to be selected, I have two choices. I can either go select and then choose inverse or shift command I, or I can deselect, so command D to deselect, and then command I will invert my mask. So I would be more likely to invert my mask than to just invert the selection. The reason being that if I wanted to go back into the mask, it makes it easier if the mask is actually set correctly for the person rather than for the background. So now when I command click, the person is actually selected. I now need to go back to my RGB composite, then to layers, and I'm now ready to copy her, and I can paste her into the background. And you can see that right off the bat it does a pretty good job of bringing the hair through and masking through to the hair. So if you need to mask anything for the compositing and it's against a clean background like this, you can easily and quickly create a mask using your channels. And if you need to go back into your mask, if it's not quite perfect, if your selections weren't quite right, you can always paint back into it. You can also click the eye icon by the RGB composite and it will show you in red exactly where your mask is. So I could see that there was areas that I'd missed on here. I can still paint into my mask and just clean up those areas with this turned on. And for some reason it's not working. Oh, because I have it in overlay mode. We must remember to check our brushes. There we go. So now I'm back in normal mode. Okay, so now I'll be able to go and clean that up, painting in with black. And just softening it. So at any point you can go back and clean up your masks and remove any areas where the mask isn't working as well as it should. So now I can turn that off, and I have a little bit of softness on there. I could use a harder brush, I could reselect with the pen tool, but that's the essence of masking.